I want to start off by talking about the process overall here. It's not perfect, but we're doing okay so far. Meaning, over the last year, we've been working on this grant, um, funded from the USDA, working with Central Vermont Planning and some consultants, and we've really generated a lot of good data through that process. We've done, I would say, a deeper analysis of some of these options than, or clearly a deeper analysis than has been done in the past. We built off some previous work, but we didn't get those final reports until fairly recently, and we still have not shared them directly with you all. So that is coming. We want you to be able to see the full reports, including things like the architectural drawings of what an expansion of the co-op could be. So that is all coming, and it's all going to get posted on our website. We'll send an e-blast that shares that with you all. So the fact we don't have it here tonight, the full reports, I'm sorry about that, but this is the start of the process. We want to have an in-person meeting to share information, talk about things. We're going to have a second meeting via Zoom on August 10th. We'll continue to talk about this. The information will be on our website. We'll have some email communication. Then our annual meeting on August 27th will be discussion of a variety of things, including these topics, and then culminating in a vote. So we do have time to gather a lot of information, hopefully from the members. And in the end, it's going to be an actual vote of what the members want to see happen next. And that voting will happen both in person at the annual meeting, as well as an opportunity for those that do not attend the annual meeting to vote on a paper ballot for a period of time after the annual meeting. So we'll set that sort of when did the ballot box open. It'll be open for a week or so, and then it'll close. So we'll have a process that we'll lay out for that to let a variety of people, whether they can come to the meetings or not, vote on this. I work for a cooperative, and I've worked for that co-op for 17 years, and we've gone through our own kind of financial ups and downs. And over those years, we worked with a consultant named Mike Cook, who is a specialist in agricultural cooperatives from the University of Missouri, and has this whole study on the life cycle of cooperatives and how they grow and develop and the challenges they face. And the summary of it is that after 20 or 30 years, often cooperatives face these sort of crisis points where they have to make some big decisions. And a lot of that is just because that amount of time, the world changes during that time. Cooperatives are often fairly slow to change because they're generally mission-based, they're focused on a certain thing. And so the fact that we're here today, 50 years later, we've survived this long, that's great. And it's not unusual that we're now facing some difficulties. So, if you think back when the co-op started, people wanted to get natural foods like brown rice or organic carrots, things that were at that time hard to find. Today, things are so different. You can get those things at Walmart or, your local farm stand, or the world is very different today. The grocery industry has consolidated. A store of our size, has a difficult time competing on price. But there are also things that are very special about still having the village store. We're very aware of that. As the treasurer, I look at our monthly financials, and I do still remain optimistic because I do see that we are responding to the challenges that we face. But I'm concerned. And just this morning, in the New York Times, I saw this quote from Ernest Hemingway that said there are two ways that businesses face bankruptcy. First gradually, and then suddenly. So that can happen even to what most well-supported, best intentioned business. And our business is financially fairly precarious. Our sales have declined. Gross sales for the year have declined over the last 4 years. From 2019 to 2020, they declined 9%. The next year, from 20 to 21, declined another 2%. From 21 to 22, gross sales declined 11%. And so far this year, we're down 5% compared to year to date. So people are shopping at other places, and we know that. Our family shops at Hunger Mountain, we shop at Shaw's, and we shop at the co-op. So how we survived despite losing money over these last years. We've received a number of grants, some federal aid through COVID programs. We received a forgivable loan from VITA. And also, we financed losses by paying vendors more slowly, which is what businesses do when you have cash flow problems. And that's a very short-term solution. And we are making some progress there. But what starts to happen when you get in that position is you get vendors that cut you off. So a big distributor like UNFI says, we're not going to deliver anymore until you hand us a check at the time of our next delivery. And then you get challenges being able to run your business. You have to skimp on ordering inventory so you sell more product to get a little more cash in so you can order it's just like we balance our personal lives. You don't pay your credit card this month, but then it's bigger the next month. So we face some of those challenges. And some of those things have to do with our location. It's great to be in the village, but we know we have limited visibility, we have poor parking, we have a hard time getting tractor trailers or bigger trucks in that could help us work with different distributors. So those aren't new challenges, but they continue to be relevant. So, for the grant, well, actually, I'll say one other thing. All of those things have resulted in an underinvestment in the business in terms of management of the business, training, paying employees well enough, in terms of physical infrastructure, maintaining the building. We've done what we can, and we've done a great job. To see Jason Mallory up on the top of that scaffolding, that's what the co-op is all about. People that really care, that are willing to do these things. But you're not going to pull off a $500,000 renovation project with that kind of DIY approach. So anyway, the study, we said, okay, what are our options? This grant. We started with, I want to recognize Rose Hall here, actually, for both all the work it took to get the grant, to manage the grant, to manage the consultants. She's really done a wonderful job. We really appreciate her. And all of us have participated, and the board and the other volunteers have put in a tremendous amount of work here. And we've got some good information as a result. So the grant entailed having a market study, which we had done one in 2018, and this updated that. That looks at who shops at the co-op, where do they live, how much do they spend. It looks at demographics, who lives in our area. It looks at competition, where else do people shop. And basically we see that, as we know, our trade area overlaps almost perfectly with Hunger Mountain's trade area, right? Most all of you shop both at the Plainfield Co-op and probably Hunger Mountain as well. We learned some things about where our shoppers live, and we learned some things based on that data. The consultant did some estimates on what our sales could be in the future at our current location and what our sales could be on a Route 2 location, where we have a lot more traffic, a lot more visibility, better parking. So that data was then fed into the feasibility studies that some other consultants did, looking at financial analysis of different options. So that gave us some background for those next studies. Those studies looked at the four options that we're going to talk about. Stay in place with the current building and basically maintain operations. Keep doing better. Basically, all these options that we look at, we know we have to do better at basic retail management. How we manage our margins, how we control costs, how we better serve customers. All of those things, there are assumptions that we need to do better on those things regardless of what our future is. So they look at, okay, if we stay in place with the building we currently own, what does our 10-year forecast look like? A key factor there is we do know that the Main Street Bridge on Route 2 is going to get closed at some point. Current projections are 2028 when they're going to redo that intersection. And we know that is going to have a pretty severe financial impact. The consultants basically came back and said, we don't see that as a viable option to just continue doing what you're doing. Given the trends in the world, given your history of sales, your demographics in the area, and basically that bridge closing might be the final straw. These are not definitive conclusions. These are just what the consultants say based on the data that we feed, the information we feed them. This is what they said. Moving on, we said, okay, what if we stay in place since we own the building and expand the building? And I know a lot of people feel very strongly about the presence of the co-op in the village. So could we make it better? A bigger building. So we'll talk a little more about the expense of that. It's considerable expense. It would give us some more retail space, but not a lot more shelf retail space for a variety of reasons. Through the renovations, you would expand the building, but you would also have to do some additional things about making the aisles wider or making better accessibility. And it would probably require renovating a number of systems related to the building about heating and cooling and ventilation and other things. You'd still be limited about our location and parking, those kinds of things. Third option was looking at a location on Route 2, like the horse farm, Allenwood Stables, saying, what if we bought a property on Route 2 and built a brand new building? And while it's very exciting and you would get the sales from the prominence on Route 2, basically the consultant said, there's really no way that you all can build a brand new building and pay for it. It's just the demographics and population and trade area studies showed that that would be too expensive, especially in particular if you factor in the particulars of buying the horse farm, the price of that, and then having to run a business, horse farm and associated with the store. Third option was looking at buying Plainfield hardware. And that we're going to talk more in detail because there is a viable pathway there, and there are pros and cons of that, right? You move out of the village, but you'd have a better location. You could continue to have hardware operations as well as groceries. Our consultants looked at the actual financials of that business, selling price, inventory, sales, and gave us some options about what might work there. So that's kind of the background. And with that, I think we'll move on to looking at some specifics of those options. Yes. So voting, basically we're going to be communicating more between now and the annual meeting. We're going to share the actual studies so you all can read them and have your own opinions on those things. We'll have the Zoom meeting coming up August 10th. We'll have the annual meeting on August 27th. So discussions between now and then culminating in a in-person as well as paper ballot vote available after the annual meeting. So that's the process.
Oh boy. Well, they keep looking at me, so I'll go next. I'm going to talk. I'm going to talk about the expansion of the co-op and what they're actually proposing. We went through a bunch of architects. We chose Co & Co out of Glover, and they came up with they came and visited. They talked to us. They talked to the manager. They came up with some beautiful first sketches, which we had to switch around because A, there's no place to deliver, and B, what do we do? So the things that are biggest on the list were, can we make the second floor handicap accessible? And do we have to? So that was a big question. And do we keep the community center in place, or does that have to change? Can we have a cafe with some food there? Would that bring more people in? And those are kind of and can we just have some more room because it's so small? So they also did some things like, let's not have the bathroom right when we walk in, and let's not have the stairs be in that main spot, and so they sort of did some more layout stuff. So they ended up, after all of this and all the back and forth, we ended up with a final plan that's kind of a one-story addition that sort of builds into a second story, just enough so that there's room for a bathroom there's room for wider stairs there. They fixed the back stairs. They updated the systems, gave us room, weatherized, gave us room for a little cafe and maybe some cooking, a little bit of a deli, and did the financials on that. So if you are reading, I guess, There are different numbers floating around. The first round of this, they said it was going to be $5,600, 560,000. Sorry, 560,000 to basically build it, but it would be more to actually build it. And the actually building it thing involves, we need permits, we need a GC, we need to give, there's all these fees and all this kind of stuff. And then, so that was the first number. It's still floating around. It is not accurate. So that's not a number. If you see in the 560,000 range, that number does not exist anymore. It's not an option. So it is still floating around because it was our first number, and we've tried to catch it everywhere, but I still saw it in one place. So what the final estimate was for actually completing the work and doing all of the check boxes was 1.08 million. And then the financial guy looked at it and he says, but you forgot about inventory, you forgot about this, you forgot about that. And his numbers came up to the one that you'll see on this form of 1.67 million. Now, I looked over that today with Rose, and we saw just at quick glance that they actually duplicated a couple of areas, maybe up to $200,000 in duplicates. So that might be going down to 1.5. So somewhere in the 1.3 to 1.5 million dollar to make that building, basically cherry. And have all the, so there's money for equipment in there that we may not need. But it's all in there. So if we were starting from scratch, it would all be there. And that includes first and second floor bathrooms. It includes a porch that wraps around the back. It includes a deli. It includes all of that. The financial consultant, when they did the money for that, we realized that if we tried to get loans for any of it, it quickly became unfeasible. So what we are looking at is raising all of that money. So that's a pretty big thing. And even if we raise all of that money, we could still be insolvent. So the formulas that they use, the assumptions they're using are they're industry wide. And I want to say Plainfield's a really special place, and we might be able to make it work, but right now with comparing it the way we're comparing it to everything, apples to everything, it doesn't look like, especially with that bridge closing, that we would not be insolvent after 2028. So that's a really sad and unfortunate conclusion. But again, miracles happen. So if so I just want to say that.
Okay, so I am going to expand a little bit on the stay in place, no build option. So that would mean that things are going to stay essentially the same. And I think it's also important to note that this is really what we're doing now, and we'd have to continue doing no matter which option we pursue, right? So this is important information. So the size of our store is about 1,860 square feet. 1,200 square feet. Sorry, I was looking at the wrong number. But the cost for improvements is $0 because we would not be making any improvements. So we looked at that. What would we do? How could we survive here? With the assumption that we hit our target margin of 35%, you're going to be hearing this a lot, and get our personnel costs down to 26% of sales. Is that right, John? Then we could make it a couple more years, but our cash reserves would continue to deplete. And we would be insolvent by 2027. The bridge, if we were still open, the bridge closure for 6 months. They're anticipating. So this is a long time. They're anticipating that we'd have to close at that time. We just wouldn't survive that 6 months. So, what else do I want to say about this? An increase in sales, as John mentioned, our sales have gone down for the past several years. An increase in our sales would, of course, have helped, but it would not necessarily have solved our problem. If we achieved the target margin, we wouldn't have had enough profit to pay our personal expenses. Again, we need to hit that target margin. We have a lot of work to do, but the staff are doing a great job. We had a good June, so that was exciting. Thank you, Deb. And again, I'm trying to think, this is kind of a little bit sad. So yeah, they were saying the cash on hand in 2026 would be depleted and insolvent by 2027. I did mention that. So this doesn't seem like a very sustainable path for us to just stay and do nothing. Does anybody have any questions? That's later. Oh, sorry.
All right, thanks, Kat. So Kat's talked about the stay-in-place option, and obviously continue to work on staffing, continue to work on the other good things about retail operation. And then Anne went into detail about what could expansion look like, what might it cost, and what's the fundraising. And then as John mentioned, when he went over the 4 options, the horse farm that was considered is something that from a fiscal perspective is not looking feasible given all of the great studies that have been done. But fortunately, there's still another option. So Rose, I think this is your turn now, where you get to delve into the details of Plainfield hardware.
I'll stand, it's okay. Well, I'm the boring speaker, so I just have to look at my little chart, but we have had very cordial conversations with Rich and Gay Christensen. The Plainfield hardware store has been for sale for about a year. They would love to see the co-op buy it, because the alternate future that they're dreading is that it becomes something like a Tractor Supply or some darn thing. You know, they've been members of the co-op a long time. They want to see the co-op succeed. They'd like to see us as the successors in their business, but none of that's financial information. So here's some financial information. Our financial analysts looked at the books of Plainfield Hardware. They opened their books to us. That's confidential information. You won't see that in the report. But based on our consultants' projections of Plainfield Hardware's expenses and revenues, and also Plainfield Co-op's expenses and revenues, the bottom line is there's a pathway to profitability if the co-op purchased that business. And what we would do is replace their grocery section with more like our kind of food. But I think it also might look a little bit like what Buffalo Mountain did. Buffalo Mountain Co-op, you know, they went to a bigger place, and they have a mix of what we think of as co-op food. And then I've learned this term from the consultants. They call it clean, conventional food. So it's not the yuckiest stuff, but it's maybe, you know, more like you get at a supermarket. So there'd be expanded space, there'd be a greater choice. As Kat was saying, our sales area in our building right now is 1,200 square feet. The Plainfield Hardware overall is 7,500 square feet. And the financial models, I'm waving this, the financial models were built on the co-op using 2,500 square feet of the hardware store space for grocery. And then, you know, the kind of sales you can generate from that, the kind of profits flow from there. Oh, well, I didn't say this important part, that really it's all predicated on the co-op running hardware and running greenhouse. I mean, that was a big, when we first started talking about this, everyone was saying, you wouldn't do hardware. What do we know about hardware? Well, and that's valid, but in the financial modeling, we would be able to retain staff from both businesses. So, you know, if we would be lucky enough to retain, if the hardware store people would stay, because they've got that experience, we could just blend those two staffs. It would be a little staff heavy, you could say. But again, in the model, we would right-size staff through 2 years of attrition. And I mean, there is turnover. Both businesses have turnover. So we could get there in 2 years, and that's all built into the model. So, you know, that's part of the pathway to profitability. The market study that John talked about a little bit, it didn't change much from 2018 to the update in 2023. I'm being very broad now, but there's something like a doubling of sales if you're on Route 2 versus in the village. So it's kind of a hard fact for us to absorb. I've walked to that co-op hundreds of times to buy groceries from my house, but you know, we're limited. So we could have a lot more sales on Route 2, and we'd have more profits, and our cash flow outlook looks good. So I'll leave it there.
Just, you know, we know that one key issue is the question of the co-op leaving the village and the hole that leaves in the village. And so that's a question for members about what would happen, but we built in either selling the current building or not. And there is also this ongoing movement to create a community trust in Plainfield that might be an organization that could buy the building and operate it in some positive manner for the community. So again, that's uncertain. But if the co-op was going to move out of the village, well, then you could say, well, what should that building become? And the community would, there's things that it could be that are positive for the village that could offset some of the loss of the co-op's presence.
Thank you, John, Kat, Anne, and Rose. They've been doing an enormous amount of work to try and understand all of the various different aspects of what these different options would mean. So the three options that are intended to be on the ballot are: one, to stay in place and to operate the business as well as you possibly can within the current building. And the second option is to expand in the current location to raise the funds to do that. And then, of course, to operate just as top-notch as you possibly can. And then the third option is to make the move to Plainfield Hardware and to bring those two businesses together. That also, again, will require some financing, but also it has an opportunity to gain more traffic and more sales. So this may feel like a really big decision if you've been part of this co-op since it was a buying club 50 years ago. I don't know if anybody here was there right at the start. And so what we'd love to do now is to turn this meeting over to you so that you get to ask all of the questions that you would like of Rose and Kat and John so that you can understand the details. The reports that they're referencing are all going to be on the website. Either they're on the website or going to be on the website very soon. So I'm getting a nod. They're going to be on the website for you very soon. And there's also going to be a second informational meeting on Zoom on August 10th. So any questions that you ask right now will be really helpful because it means that when the board presents on August 10th, they'll be able to present that information as well. So definitely any questions you ask tonight are also helping the board. So then, right now we're a pretty small group, so I don't think we need to worry too much about time. But what I am going to ask is that everybody kind of ask their clarifying questions first. So let's get as much information out as we can. And then let's get into some discussion and sharing some of those maybe more intangible aspects. So, Andy.
I have a bylaws question. Which
Ooh.
is, if the membership is presented with 3 options, does any one of those options need to get 50% plus to go forward, or is it the option that gets the most votes?
Ooh. That is a very good question. I'm not sure if the board can answer that right now, but we're going to take that question down. Hang on, Rose sounds like she may have an answer.
A real estate decision requires a 2/3 majority in our bylaws, so hey, we haven't thought that through.
Okay.
It's going to be important. The actual creating the ballot and wording it and structuring it hasn't been done yet, and that's going to be really important. Exactly how we structure it.
So just making sure that everybody heard that with the bylaws that you voted on last year. So a real estate decision is going to require 2/3 of the vote. Okay, great. I'm sorry I don't know everybody's name.
That's Deborah. First of all, thank you guys for all the work that you've done. Really appreciate it, and it's very clear. Except I do have one clarifying question. In the chart, it says that for the hardware store that it would cost a certain amount of money for the grocery and deli, but more for the if we were to include the hardware in the greenhouse. So and you were just saying that it would include the hardware that we would be buying the hardware in the greenhouse. Is there an option just to have the grocery and the deli? That's what it looks like on this chart.
Oh, okay.
So can everybody hear when people ask a question? Great, so we'll make sure we repeat the question. So the question is there an option to buy just essentially that middle part of the building, which is the grocery and the deli, or is it all or nothing? So Rose, the answer.
Well, I think at the outset, there's Deborah. We didn't want to be too complicated. I mean, the board has talked about, well, could we just lease grocery space? But the consultant, who's had long experience and his specialty is co-ops, was like, you don't want to mess around with that. You've got 2 registers and 2 point of sale systems, and you've got a recipe for confusion, is what he recommended. He said, keep it simple, just buy it. You know, as we go down the road, do we have to go to plan B or C? Maybe, I don't know.
And also, those 2 numbers, those are about the sales forecasts. There's really only one number for purchasing.
Thanks. Okay.
One other thing I'd say about the purchasing, that 2.1 million, that's a big number. The hardware store is for sale, I think, for 1.5 right now. All that extra money comes from the entire project. Managing the project, legal fees, new equipment, stocking inventory. There's a lot of costs besides just the actual real estate purchase.
All right, more questions. Who has questions? Well then, I got to compliment the board though. How great.
Well, I'm wondering about the management of the hardware complex. If the co-op is in there, a cooperative runs a certain way based on certain principles, and a for-profit capitalist business runs a different way based on some different assumptions. We're all concerned about the community, I know, but still, well, I think the co-op does not have a stellar history in terms of efficient management. And I wonder how that will work out, and maybe it's too early to know. On the other hand, it raises for me a question about compatibility in terms of economic systems.
Okay, so I'm not sure that everybody heard that. So fabulous question about the different management styles that you might have from a co-op, from a cooperative, compared to the management styles of a for-profit business hardware. And also kind of reinforcing that this is a community affair, a co-op. So I don't know if there's anything that any of the board members can share at this point in time about some of your thoughts related to how management could work. So Anne?
All I know is that at this point, the current, aside from the owners, the current managers of the hardware store are thinking about staying on. Of course, it's all like years down the line, life happens, whatever. But there is supposedly going to be, they're not going to just like up and leave. There's going to be some instruction. I don't know if that's enough of an answer. That's kind of all the answer we have right now.
Well, but who's in charge?
Well, one of my assumptions through this is that a bigger business is going to give us more capacity to find sort of professional management that can run a larger retail business. That certainly exists even in the cooperative mindset in the cooperative world. So we have the assumption that we could achieve that. But I think the two big challenges I see are one, the actual pulling off the project. Like, how do we come up with the cash to, start hiring a real estate lawyer to, the management of the transition of the process. We don't have the cash to do that, so we need to start. We need some funds from somewhere to get us going before we're actually in the building. But I think some of that is solvable. For example, the working lands grants that are available through the state would be a good fit for this. I think we would qualify. And we plan to apply for one of those. That would provide $40,000 that could help with this kind of project management of a transition. There's some possibility of owner financing from the owners of Plainfield Hardware, which would really be positive versus a business loan. And there are some other cooperative loans. So management is a big challenge, but I think that we, in some ways, I look at that store and I think, well, if they can do it, we can do it too,
There's also the assumption that Rich and Gay would be replaced by one full-time equivalent human person. So there would be another manager to replace them. It's that person.
All right, so that's good. So you wouldn't be replaced by AI or a robot. I'm sorry. Thank you, Kat. It's going to be a human. So there's a number of details in any one of these options that are going to need to be thought through. So an implementation plan. So the task that you'll have ahead of you as members of the co-op is to give the board a direction. Continue to pursue option A, B, or C. And no matter which option there are, there's going to be things that the board on your behalf is going to need to wrestle with. So fabulous to bring that up. And it's definitely something with my very brief involvement so far in the co-op, I know is already on the minds of the board, how to do that effectively with all of these options that are before you. Questions, more questions.
Use the mic.
Can you hear me now? I'm not sure if this qualifies as as just an informational question or not, but you've got three options here, and it seems to me that the second option, the idea of spending $1.6 million to go insolvent in 4 years, is not even really a question that should be asked to the membership. It seems to me that as a board, you could ask the question, should we buy the hardware store? Because if the answer to that is no, then the only option that I see here is you stay where you are and you become insolvent again into 2027, assuming everything. And having attended a few of these meetings now, I know what happens when the membership is asked 4 or 5 different things. What would you like to do? You're going to get 4 or 5 answers or 10 answers back. And it seems to me that one thing you might want to consider is just ask about purchase of the hardware store. It's one question, and if the answer is no, then your only option is to stay in place.
What's your name?
I'm sorry, Kevin.
Henry?
Kevin.
Thank you. Do you want to join the board?
No.
I think I got the message. You're gonna ask
So,
again? No.
and I was just going to ask if the board's thought of anything else that they're dying to share.
We actually discussed things like that, and we felt that that meant we were making decisions that should not be made by just us. And again, as I said, there are some assumptions built into the financing that might be worth looking at harder in the expansion phase. And that was all.
Because the question about how much do we trust these numbers or not, the stay in place option could also mean reinventing the model. What if we downsized and went to all volunteers and it was only a bulk ordering club, or it turned into a cafe, or so I'm not saying we're not pursuing those different models now, but that's it's not a definite that the business is going to go insolvent at this date. Unless we, continue on the same path. Those, just despite me saying those things, I still that's not what the board is currently pursuing. This sort of change the model of the co-op from what it is today to something totally new in place. But just saying, who knows about the future?
All right, so any thoughts, comments, perspectives that you want to share on any aspects of this, including any more informational questions that come to you? And if anybody has anything written on their cards they want read out, just wave them at me and I'll come and get them from you.
My name is Joe John, and I'm on the building committee. I've been working on this building over there for 14 years, and we're still trying to paint the building. When I started back 14 years ago, we were talking about painting the building, and I'm glad that we're sort of trying to do that. But I do think what I hear here is that buying the hardware store seems like the option that you're all talking about. I do think that we should think about the building we have as an asset, because I think there's a lot of people want to have a store in the village. Maybe we could keep that building and have a satellite store, a small one that would be, you could order stuff and be brought from the hardware store into the village. That's an idea. Another one is possibly turning that building into some apartments. If we turned it into apartments, we'd have a steady income that could always back up our problems, the sales at the store. Maybe that might be an idea too, something to think about. I don't know. I just think that building over there is an asset. We sell it. Maybe that's one way to do it, but maybe we keep it and solve some of these issues because I know a lot of people are going to be sad about moving to the hardware store because it's not in the village. But maybe if we could, say we're not going to completely abandon the village, we're going to keep something going there and also have the hardware store so we have the best of both worlds, maybe.
Thank you. I love that outlook where the best of both worlds and that building could become something. Also an idea of kind of like satellite and delivery. So there's definitely a lot of creative options.
Say one thing. One of the assumptions we made was that we weren't going to sell the building until 2026. And I feel like that's kind of important because it's not like we need this tax value money to move any of these projects forward. I just wanted to kind of make that clear. So we would hold on to the building for a while and then figure out what to do with it so it doesn't leave the giant hole in the village that we're all worried about.
All right. Other thoughts, questions, perspective, anybody would like to share? Yay.
Okay, excellent.
All right. So All right, so here we go. So, okay, from Renee. Excellent, thank you. So Renee Carpenter had to leave early, sharing these thoughts. Reading the numbers read possibilities. Only one option allows us to continue as a food co-op. The hardware store acquisition, great. We've taken lots of time to assess this again. The question not answered on this paper is how can we move ahead with the hardware store and maintain solvency by some use of the current location? So some echoes of what was just shared. There's lots to talk about in that regard, using the deli and kitchen to supply the village store, survey in town around food needs and desires, limit inventory, create an informal gathering spot or cafe supported by the new main co-op location, host more village store fundraising co-op events upstairs in the community space. In-village proponents should be the primary organizers. Look at the fundraising model of the Adamant Co-op. Thank you for the excellent work and process. Now let's do it. Taking note, many people are not here dealing with flooding issues, which he's going back to deal with. So definitely there is an online informational meeting on August 10th. So definitely tell everybody about that. And then also information that will be presented at the annual meeting where the vote will occur.
Thank you, Renee. Deborah?
So, having spoken to Annie Gilliard at Buffalo Mountain, one of the things, the positive pieces of having a co-op that's not just organic food, that includes whatever you call the conventional type of groceries, is that it brings in, surprisingly, the rest of the community. And I think that I love our co-op and I love our community, and as a person who works at Plainfield and knows the whole community, I feel that we lose out by not inviting them somehow and having them join us. And so I think that that could be a positive piece of moving to the hardware store, because the whole community uses the hardware store, and so it would bring people in to the co-op. So that's just one thought. And I have to say that I have not always been a proponent of moving to the hardware store, and the work that you guys have done has me feeling more positive about it. So great job. The other thing that I thought of was having people from Buffalo Mountain come talk to folks from our co-op, just so people could hear about what a positive, how the move has been really positive for them. So I think that was another thought. And in terms of Glenda's question about the different kinds of management, my thought immediately was, so what are the possibilities of the hardware store and the greenhouse being run as in the co-op model? So we don't have to have a capitalist corporate type of model and two different types of systems. So it's something to think about. And and I know that there are examples out there of co-op hardware stores and everything else. So I think that that's something else to look into. I love the ideas of both Joe John and Renee's of the village store still being a satellite. I think that would really allay the fears and anxieties of folks who have for the last 50 years walked to the co-op and bought their milk and their bread and all that sort of stuff. Anyways, yeah. So those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Just to expand on that, kind of this co-op and hardware model. Ace Hardware that supplies Plainfield hardware is actually a consumer cooperative. Fun fact.
Yeah, oh, and there's also, like, think about the Marshfield Food Show, which is now a cooperative employee owned, right?
And we are assuming that the co-op would run the whole thing. Hardware, grocery, greenhouse. You know, I mean, you could have something, say, where you lease the greenhouse out to a farmer who runs that, but the co-op would be overseeing it all. And then one other thing about, you know, affordability in the community, you know, another, if we chose to stay in place to be more profitable, the other thing is you could simply, we would need to mark things up more. So you're making more money, and then you would lose sales potentially, or you lose, you know, who can afford to shop there. But so part of this move is with that. I see it in terms of this affordability lens as well. Not only solvency, but we may just be too small to have to price grocery properly in our current situation.
Absolutely. Do you want the microphone? Project? All right.
So John, you said that the target margin was like 35%. That's across every department in the store, right? Because each department, I work at the co-op 2 days a week. I'm a registered person on Fridays, and I'm also the buyer for the third, 12th, and the tea department. My margin for those departments is 45%. Every department has a different margin target. And I understand that we have to maintain a certain level of margin profitability. I think part of the problem with that is that sometimes a lot of our buyers are extremely sensitive to the needs of the community and the folks that come through our doors. And a lot of the time,
So, do you want to come up and talk? And so basically she's asking questions about margins that I think probably John can answer. Yeah?
Sorry, Kat, I'm gonna go all over. So important.
I think a lot of times our margins are affected by a buyer's sensitivity to our community. Not a day goes by when we don't hear frustration and complaints about prices. It's a daily thing, multiple times a day. And I think our buyers are influenced by that more than people think. It is really hard for us to kind of have that hard line about this is how much we cost, things cost. We're trying to always juggle that margin bit, what things cost, how much we're paying, how much we have to charge, and people telling us we can't afford it, we can't afford it, we can't afford it. We're going to shop elsewhere. And then, so we're going to buy this expensive building, we're going to move out of the community, and the prices are still going to go up. And that's just sort of where, it's like, how is this going to work for the folks that do rely on us more often? We've been through a pandemic where our sales skyrocketed because all of a sudden everyone is trapped at home. And even just last week, we had a good couple of days right afterwards because people were trapped. And and there's always those few in the community that come through here, our doors every day, and they don't have necessarily the means to go other places. And a lot of times I just kind of have the feeling that the ones who need us the most are not the ones who can't afford to go farther afield. And so that's just my perspective.
All right. So thanks, Deb. So a lot of perspective about different margins in different departments and the pressure to make the food available at an affordable price to the community. So Anne and Rose and John, do you want to add anything here? See what if Anne left anything unsaid.
One of the things, Deb, about moving is that we would be in a place where we could get bulk discounts. Right now, our wholesale cost for cheese, it sometimes is more than Hunger Mountain is selling it for. Yeah. Because of the fact is we are not in a position to join any of the collectives, any of the things, because we just don't have the sales thing. And that's, even if we have the same high margins at the new place, the overall prices to begin with will be lower, so it would be more affordable. I agree that there's a problem. People walk, and people need to walk, and having a walkable village and having things in walkable this is a big passion of mine. So I kind of hate the idea of moving the co-op to the hardware store, but also I hate the co-op closing more. So that's kind of. But we should do something for those people. We should definitely put that as a major piece. I agree.
One thing in a general way, we can say this, that the margins on the hardware side of the business are quite good. So that's a positive. And Deb is right that, so as the board, we have this sort of financial responsibility. We come to the management and say, you have to hit our target margins, and we're not, and that's why we're not making monthly profits. And they're saying, but if we mark that tub of yogurt up to $8, no one's going to buy it, and it's not fair to put that price on something for people in our community. And that's, so in some ways, you could say our co-op losses, we're sort of doing that to keep prices lower. The problem is our prices still aren't really low enough. So does that mean that the model is broken? We're sort of not doing either one. We're not hitting our margin to make a profit to continue, and our food is still not affordable enough. I don't want to state that we do have, some things are affordable enough, and we have to pay enough money for good quality food, and the co-op has much higher quality food than the supermarket.
All right, really good discussion. Who else would like to add to that or has another topic they'd like to open up? Yes. Come on forward. I have a little Price is Right thing going on, but it's not quite the same.
Thanks. Hi, everybody. I'm Kevin. I used to work at the co-op. I wrote the budget 3 years in a row, 2017, 18, and 19. No, 2019, 2018, 19, 20. Anyway, and a little bit in the COVID years. During that time, I worked with Peter and Gene and a few others in management, and we had a few good years there. 2018, we were able to come out with over $30,000 in the black. 2019, we had another nice year. COVID hit, obviously changed a lot of things. The reality is there's just more problems top to bottom than people understand. That's hard to get into, but the fact of the matter is that the entire business is ran by part-timers. It's 100%, I think, part-time at this point. Maybe one full-time employee. This is just not a model that works. It struggles with communication. It struggles with literally everything. Getting any process, any standard operating procedure to go within this place. It's dysfunctional. That's just the fact of the matter. The reason that people come and go in management so often is because they get burnt out. The models that exist within the board of policy governance burn out the management. Then they don't want to deal with it. They feel they're put in a corner, which is probably why Peter so bluntly named it Peter's Corner. But it was funny. It was good. It was just, there was never a thing. I felt way too much on it. I had to step down with my kid. Gene was basically the punching bag for the board at the time, took over the role, took basically no pay. And I just got to run the place behind the scenes. And in that time, I was able to just spend my time training buyers, creating margin reports, and creating a weekly budget for the buyers that did not exist before and has not existed since, where margins, cost of goods, sales were tracked. They had an updated week of how they were doing in terms of if they were hitting their targets or not. And they knew how to spend then the following week or not. And these just don't exist. They didn't exist before. They don't exist after. And the fact of the matter is we are now 4 generations since the management collective of just information being passed down and passed down and passed down. And the reality is in all that time, we just lose information. And in my short time there, it's just frustrating to see now that there have been additions that happened, like adding a hand wash sink to prep us for a deli, adding a generator system for when there are power outages that happen, and all of these other systems that took place, putting every single piece of information we have available within the co-op in our cloud system, and to just see these things get tossed to the side is frustrating, to be blunt. And I do not have a lot of faith in either moving forward in its current location with what stands now. It will be insolvent. 2027, I think, is the bright side. Looking at the great picture, this place will make money through October, which is historically on a good year, that's what happens. And then we project to lose money November and December, and January and February. And then we come out strong getting to the spring. But if we move to the hardware store, I think that's the best idea. However, I struggle to see the future of the management there to then run the place and create all of these things that are needed to run a small business. Thank you.
I don't know if we really, I would agree with many of those things, and that's part of the challenge of running a small business. And also this underinvestment that has happened in the business. You know, there isn't money to train buyers and to train management on some of these. You know, retail is a real skill, and we tend to think these days of like it being a low-wage job that anyone can do, but there's this question of how you charge different margins, different departments, and what moves, and how you track that, and consumer behavior that results. There's a real skill to that, and it's not easy. So thanks for that, Kevin. Other questions?
Please make sure that we have your correct email, because we don't have enough money to send out mailings to warn for the meeting, so we're using email, and we really need to make sure that you get those emails. So if you're not getting them, let us know, and you can put your email on the index card, and we can take care of that for you. Thank you.
Anybody who wants to vote has to be a member in good standing, and we will probably be asking your member number so we can keep track of who's voted, so we don't vote twice, etc. So make a note of that next time. I'm bad at remembering mine. But member in good standing means your dues are paid. So we can't take votes from people who aren't in good standing.
Yes, well, you can memorize your member number, but I'm assuming you know your name, so that's also helpful. So don't worry, you'll be fine. Member number.
And while we're making some sort of general announcements, we do need some new candidates for the board. And I will tell you that, you know, I'm fairly new, right? I've been on a year, and I enjoy it, and I'm looking forward to continuing because my term does continue. But I don't see it as being a burden or stressful. I find it very exciting. Looking forward, I encourage you to think of it in the same way and look around the community about people that you think would be good to help us run this business. We need good people, and it's an exciting time to be part of it. So.
All right, so I think I've heard a pitch to be a member. I've heard a pitch to be a board member. So thank you all for coming out tonight and asking lots of really good questions. So the board's definitely going to be seeing what other information they want to make available, maybe on the website, but also on the August 10th Zoom meeting. So definitely tell your neighbors, tell your friends, tell your fellow co-op members, so that you can all be as informed as possible and help to decide the future of what has been a fabulous organization for the village for the last 50 years, and long may it continue.